Hi guys, my name is Kira and welcome back to my YouTube channel, True Crime Revealed. For those of you who are subscribed, welcome back. If you're new, welcome to the channel. Today's story is going to take place in Tennessee in the year of 2010, and it is involving NBA star Lorenzen Wright. It's a very tragic story just because he was betrayed in the worst way possible by his wife, who was supposed to be loving and supportive and caring. And it was a plot for murder scheme where she actually contracted with Billy Turner, who actually went in and did the deed in murdering Lorenzen Wright. Now, it is a case that has been very highly publicized just because of who he was as an NBA star. So if you have heard about the story prior, hopefully today you can learn something new. And if you've never heard about it, then I am honoring his legacy today and just telling his story, a little bit of backstory about who he was as a person, his NBA career, and then unfortunately his untimely death. So it is a very sad story involving the murder of Lorenzen Wright, who was an NBA star. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the story right now. If you guys like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. For those of you that have been doing it and have become a part of the True Crime Revealed family, I really appreciate it. And again, if you're new, we'd love to have you back. Welcome. But we're going to go ahead and get started right now on the tragic murder of NBA star Lorenzen Wright.
Hi, come through. Georgetown 911, where's your emergency? Hello? 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 Son, I have nothing but gunshots. Hello? Hello?
Hi, and welcome back to True Crime Revealed. Today's story is going to take place in Memphis, Tennessee in the year of 2010. Now, it involves the NBA star Lorenzen Wright, and it's a very sad story because Lorenzen was a very successful NBA basketball player who had it all, who had a very successful career. He had a wife, he had children, he had a loving mother and family, and it all just kind of went south in July of 2010 after he went missing on July 18th. So I do want to just kind of give you a backstory about who Lorenzen Wright was, just kind of how he rose to fame in the NBA, his successes playing for different teams, and then ultimately his demise on when he was ultimately murdered back in 2010. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the video on the murder of Lorenzen Wright. Lorenzen Wright was born on November 4th, 1975 in Oxford, Mississippi. He is the son of Deborah Marion and Herb Wright. Now, even though Lorenzen was born in Oxford, Mississippi, he spent a lot of time in Memphis, Tennessee with his father. His parents didn't really stay together very long, and so he spent a lot of time with his father. However, he was very close with both his father and his mother, and he would spend time with his father a lot growing up, but also his mother as well. It is stated that his father was actually a basketball coach, and at just the age of 10, Lorenzen was learning a lot from his father. Regarding athletics, he would go on long jogs with his father. They would go to the recreation center, and he'd teach him everything that he would know about basketball. So Lorenzen was very lucky that his father was a coach, and he could basically teach him these various tips and tricks as how to be a successful basketball player. Now, Herb faced a lot of criticism because they were stating that he was overworking his child, and they were just stating that, you're kind of overworking him, let him be a kid. But he knew that he wanted to be a motivation for his son, and he wanted him to be successful in basketball and ultimately do what he loved. So he didn't let that bother him at all. And the result, of course, is that Lorenzen became a very successful basketball player in the NBA. Now, remember, Lorenzen Lorenzen's parents were not together. However, he would spend time with his mother and his father. And in one of the times where he was spending time more at his mother's house, unfortunately, his father was shot and he ended up being paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. So that was definitely a blow to Herb and his son. However, Herb didn't let that stop him and he still decided that he wanted to train Lorenzen. Now, Herb was very successful in basketball himself. He was a great basketball coach, but he also played basketball when he was in college. When he was enrolled at Shelby State College, he actually became the all conference and all state scholarship recipient to the University of Mississippi. After earning that degree, he actually played overseas in Finland, averaging about 38 points and 19 rebounds. So he definitely was a world class athlete as well and a force to be reckoned with as well. So it only makes sense that his son, Lorenzen, would follow in his footsteps, ultimately becoming a super successful NBA athlete. Now, having lived in both Mississippi and Tennessee, Lorenzen actually played at the Lafayette High School in Oxford, and then in his senior year, when he was living in Memphis, Tennessee, he played at the Zachariah M. Rigsby High School. After high school, Lorenzen then went on to play college level basketball at the University of Memphis, and he was actually recognized as a third team All American by the Associated Press. And again, this was during his second year at the University of Memphis. He was a frat brother as well, and he was a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. So he definitely kept himself busy leading up to the NBA draft of 1996. So 1996 was Lorenzen Wright's year. He was selected 7th overall by the Los Angeles Clippers in the 1996 NBA draft out of University of Memphis. Now, this was during his sophomore year at the University of Memphis, and he was selected first round, 7th overall pick. So he was super, super excited by this. Of course, his father was beyond proud. You can see them here pictured together, and you can just see the joy in Herb's eyes. The whole dreams do come true. Hard work and determination does pay off in Herb's eyes. And Lorenzen's just happy that his father is ultimately proud of him. He's like, yeah, look, Dad, we did it. All that hard work. I've been in the NBA draft. I'm playing for the Los Angeles Clippers. So it's a huge accomplishment for Lorenzen. It's going to open up a lot of new doors. And essentially, this whole draft changes his life. So Lorenzen was very excited to be drafted by the Clippers in 1996. He was a hoot on the court. It was stated that they nicknamed him the Howl because he screamed after dunking the ball or blocking a shot. So he was definitely a firecracker out there on the court, but ultimately an awesome player. He actually earned $55 million during his 13 seasons with the Clippers. He also worked with the Atlanta Hawks. He played with the Memphis Grizzlies, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Sacramento Kings. So all in all, just a really well respectable and great player overall. So I'm going to go ahead and just play a little clip of some of his plays and then we'll be back. So as you can see here on the videos, he was very skilled at what he did and was just very well respected. Lorenzen was known to have a pretty kind heart and to be pretty generous. After he joined the Clippers in 1996, there was a teenage ball boy for the Clippers. His name was Ian Rice, and he actually became good friends with Lorenzen and Lorenzen's wife at the time, Shera. He actually helped the couple move into their custom home in Playa del Rey, and Ian was also known to care for the couple's Rottweilers that they owned, so they had gotten pretty close. So close that Lorenzen actually lent Ian his Chevrolet Tahoe that had televisions, a video game system, the works for prom. And he and his wife actually bought him a tuxedo and Nikes to match the cherry red SUV. So they hooked him up. And when Ian graduated from high school, Lorenzen and Shera actually attended the ceremony and they actually rented him a limousine with a class of 1999 banner on the limo. So that's just kind of what Lorenzen did. He felt like he was blessed after being drafted into the Clippers and living this really changed life that he had. He just wanted to bless other people as well. And he just had a really kind spirit and heart about him as well. In further interviews, Ian is stating that Lorenzen was smitten by his wife at the time, Shera. They fell in love, they got married, and he states, and I quote, she had a grip on him. So she was really, really influential as to how she made Lorenzen feel. And he was in love with her, and they got married, and they had several children together. So we're going to now talk about the relationship of Lorenzen and Shera. Lorenzen Wright and Shera Robinson at the time had been together for roughly 13 years before they divorced in 2010. They'd known each other a while. As you can see, they're both very young here, attending a dance together, and they basically fell in love, and they had several children together, and they got married. So he was definitely smitten by Shera. The couple basically were lovebirds, and it was in the honeymoon stage. In the very beginnings of their marriage, they were very happy together, fell in love, and ultimately had several children together. After getting married, Lorenzen and Shera had several children. They had Lorenzen Wright Jr., Shamar Wright, Lauren Wright, Lamar Wright, Sierra Wright, Sophia Wright, and Lawson Wright. And they did something really cool. I think Lorenzen and Shera, if you notice, each of their children's names either start with an L or an S for the parents. So I always find that really interesting when parents do that. But yeah, they had 7 kids. Now, sadly, one of the children was one that passed away, and it did take a toll on Lorenzen. He was very upset about this, but his daughter, Sierra, actually passed away in the year 2003, and that's something that just kind of always stayed with him. So she apparently had sudden infant death syndrome, and she died as an infant, which was very, very difficult for him. In total, he did have 7 children before Sierra Wright's passing in 2003. Now, even though this heartache and tragedy set in the heart of Lorenzen, he is very generous. He has a big heart, and he wanted ultimately the legacy of his daughter to live on. So he actually started the Sierra Wright Scholarship Foundation, and it was basically a fund that was available to any participating high school Memphis area senior that wanted to attend a Memphis area college or university. So I thought that was really neat that he started that in his daughter's honor to let that legacy in honor of his daughter live on. Despite the hurt that he still had in his heart, he tried to make somewhat of a positive out of it, and that's a foundation that he was able to create for her. Of Lorenzen's 7 children, we have here pictured on the screen Shamar and Lamar Wright, and they are twin brothers, the sons of Lorenzen, who have decided to follow in their father's footsteps, and they have decided to play basketball as well. So I think it's so cool now that there are 3 generations. You've got Grandpa Herb, you've got Dad Lorenzen, and now Shamar and Lamar Wright, who are now going to be playing for the SIUE Cougars. So they are letting that legacy be fulfilled, basically continued on even in their father's passing. They're still going to play basketball. It's a sport that they love. It's a sport that's been in their family for 3 generations now. And I think it's awesome that they are playing basketball professionally. I hope it's something that they continue to do as well by keeping their father's legacy alive and ultimately pursuing what it is that they love doing. Lorenzen Wright Jr. was actually Lorenzen and Shera's firstborn, and he too kept the legacy and was playing basketball for a while as well. So, just a lot of talent in this particular family as far as playing basketball professionally goes. So, pictured on the screen here is Lorenzen Wright and his wife, Shera Wright. And like I said, they were married for about 13 years. Now, initially, they were really happy. They got married, they knew each other since they were very young. Once they got married, they started having a lot of children, just basically were in love. And like Ian Rice said, he was in love with her. Lorenzen loved Shera and she had a grip on him. So she was clearly working it. He loved her and all was well for a while. However, privately, there started to be trouble, which occasionally would start spilling out into the public. And people started kind of noticing this a little bit. Starting in August of 2005, police actually responded to a domestic disturbance call at the Wrights' home in Memphis at the time. And when they arrived, according to news reports, Shera had a cut on her hand and abrasions on her jaw. However, there were no arrests or charges. So there were actual rumors of some type of physical violence or abuse. She also suggested in a book that she wrote, which we're going to talk about here a little later. So there was definitely trouble in paradise. There were other times it stated that when Lorenzen was with one of his friends, Mike Gibson, they had gotten into a family's RV and they had a couple of strippers there. Shearer discovers what's going on, and his friend Gibson stated that Lorenzen jumped out of the window. Shearer forced her way into the RV, chased the strippers out, ripped off Gibson's shirt, and tore up the vehicle's interior. So, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She was pretty jealous, and if he kind of had a little bit of a wandering eye or was trying to have some fun outside of the marriage, doing extracurriculars, if you will, she was not one to take it or bow down easily. And essentially, it sounds like he was afraid of her because if they have the two strippers in the RV, he literally hauls ass, runs out of the, or jumps out, excuse me, of the RV's window, and she comes in there, basically chases and scares the heck out of the strippers, tears off Gibson's shirt, and pursues, actually destroying their RV. So she had a lot of rage, a lot of bent up bad energy just because of what she was harboring against her husband. If he was entertaining strippers, possibly other women, Shera was not having it. And there's a lot of reports with family and friends, or even the police report I was telling you about earlier. So there was a lot of that going on in this particular marriage. So Shera actually wrote a book, and it was entitled Mr. Tell Me Anything. And the two main characters in the story are eerily similar to Lorenzen and Shera, and they have a handful of violent incidents between the two of them that are folded within allegations of infidelity and explicit descriptions of sexual encounters. So she actually told the Memphis Commercial Appeal in 2015 that 99.9% of the book contained true stories from her relationship with Lorenzen, and she described it as my story. And Lorenzen Jr. said that his mother wrote about things that really happened in her life. So there's a lot of information in this book, just kind of detailing events that happened in their marriage, detailing events about possibilities in the murder, a lot of that. There's even a part in the book where the wife is found catching her husband cheating with another woman. In the book, it is recounted that the wife actually kicks down the bathroom door, pulls out the mistress by her hair, is repeatedly punching on her, and then the wife then turns around and slaps the hell out of her husband as well. So there's a lot of violence, a lot of sexual innuendos, and like I said, it stated that her own son stated that his mother wrote a lot about what really happened in her life in the book. So it is eerily close to real life as to what was going on. And it's like, is this supposed to be a tell all? Is this supposed to be a hint? So just really weird that she would actually write this book that's eerily based on true events. So Shera, having been married to Lorenzen, this famous NBA player, this baller, has grown very accustomed to a very lavish lifestyle. They're living in mansions that have 17 bedrooms in Tennessee, and she just was basically living the high life. However, his NBA career is ending in 2009, early 2009. Lorenzen's career is ending, and the two of them just decide to separate. Very interesting that they just now decide to separate once his career has come to an end. She no longer feels like she's going to be able to live this lavish lifestyle, I guess, with him anymore. The two of them decide to separate. It's very sad because they have banks that are now foreclosing on two of their homes, including that 17-room mansion in Tennessee. And the two of them had about $3 million in joint debt. So they definitely had a lot going on. They had to go ahead and make sure that they did a permanent parenting plan as well before their divorce was going to be finalized in February of 2010. And because Lorenzen had been getting a previous income as a professional basketball player prior, he had to pay Shera $26,650 a month in alimony and child support. So, again, their extreme lavish lifestyle pretty much was coming to an end. However, he was still expected to pay Shera that amount monthly. And in addition to that, he had to maintain, listen up, guys, a $1 million life insurance policy with Shera as the trustee. So you can kind of see where this is going, right? Not only is she getting the 26,000 a month for child support and alimony, she's got bigger fish to fry, and I mean that sarcastically, because there's a $1 million life insurance policy with her name to cash in. She figures his career's over, their lifestyle, lavish lifestyle is over, but hey, I've got this $1 million life insurance policy. So she gets to thinking and she gets to planning the demise of Lorenzen Wright. This is a man that she fell in love with, someone who adored and cherished her, and who she at one point, I believe, did love and cherish and adore. But she's carrying all this resentment if there were infidelities, if he had a wandering eye. He's definitely not having the money that he had before, he's not making it. So her devious little mind gets to going and she starts planning on what she can do to make sure that she ends up on top. And if it includes murder, so be it for Shera. She does not care. And we're going to discuss now the plot for murder scheme, the disappearance, and ultimately the murder of this poor man. Now, a few months after their divorce, Lorenzen thought that things had kind of cooled off a little bit. It wasn't as hot as far as the tension he thought had kind of died down a little bit. The relationship to him at least had seemed that way. And Lauren, their oldest daughter, stated that her dad actually wanted to remarry Shera. So Lorenzen was still very much in love with her. He wanted to remarry her again. He would actually tell them every day that he was working on winning her back. He wanted to get back into her good graces. He wanted them to be a family again. That was his woman, the love of his life. He wanted to turn things around and to get back with her. But Shera unfortunately had other plans. Now, investigators actually found a series of sexually explicit text messages that Shera sent Lorenzen on about July 17th, and it was stated that they were designed to lure him to come back to Memphis, right? So she's trying to lure him back into what is going to be her plan of his ultimate demise. So Lorenzen, unbeknownst as to what's going on, decides to leave his home in Atlanta the next day. It stated that he didn't even have a change of clothes that he packed. He just wanted to get there to try to see what was going on with Shera, how they can make amends, if they could start over. He was excited to see her, basically. But again, he had no idea what was going on and ultimately what she had planned for him. It's very sad. One of his close friends, Phil Dotson, actually told investigators that he dropped them off, Lorenzen and Lorenzen's son, Lorenzen Jr., at the home that Shera was renting in Memphis, and nothing seemed amiss. Lorenzen was actually planning to drive back to Atlanta with a friend, and with the friend and the children, they were actually going to go to Six Flags Whitewater. So they were excited about going to the water park. He stated when he arrived at Shera's home that morning, Lorenzen was not there. And the friend, Jeremy Orange, actually called his friend Lorenzen and there was no answer. So Gibson actually called Shera and she suggested that Lorenzen had run off with a lady friend. So she actually texted Jeremy back and she said Lorenzen was probably in one of his little holes and ended the message LOL. So she's basically just using the fact that he possibly was a ladies' man before, he liked the ladies, and oh, he's not with me, he's with one of his little ladies, one of his little hoochies or whatever she wanted to call them. So basically, that just kind of goes back to what we talked about, how jealous she could be, how upset she could be if he was possibly seeing other women. And even in his disappearance, she's still using that as fuel and then kind of softens it with an LOL to make it seem like, oh, I'm not jealous. I'm not upset about anything. We're not together anymore. We're cordial. We're just basically still going to be on a friendly basis for our kids, but we have nothing together anymore. I'm cool. If he's with one of his little holes, as she puts it, that's good with me, but he's not with me though. To try to just basically offset suspicion off of her to make it seem like she doesn't have anything to do with his disappearance. Now, mothers always have intuition and they're going to basically do all that they can to make sure that their child is okay, no matter how old they are. So that was no different for Deborah Marion. At this point, her baby is 34 years old, but she wants to know where her baby is. So she files a missing persons report for him on July 22nd to make sure he's okay. And also, his father thought that he may have been in Europe trying to get his mind right. Others thought that maybe he had gone to Israel for a basketball tryout. And just different speculations were going around about where Lorenzen could possibly be. So, in his disappearance, no one could really pinpoint where he was, but his mother again was very concerned that he was missing and she filed a missing persons report. So, Miss Shera here, Miss Actress, decides when the investigators come to her door about a week after he had quote unquote vanished. She fought tears as she spoke with the reporters and the investigators at her door. And she said, I'm not going to believe anything other than he's fine now. So, in the words of Rihanna, she put on quite a show. And she basically was an actress. She was an actress that made it seem like she was distraught, that made it seem like she was upset, that her children's father, her ex husband, the love of her life was missing, but that she wasn't going to accept or claim that anything had happened. Kind of similar to the one that we just did, the other story that we just did, Sins of My Daddy. Same thing, where the father was pretending like he didn't know what happened to his daughter. He really wanted her to come home, but he wasn't going to accept that anything was wrong with her. So, a lot of these murderers that do this, male or female, as you can see, it's very similar. They typically want to play the victim role as to, I had nothing to do with this. I'm not going to accept it. I know they're going to come home knowing full well what they have done and the state as to which the individual is currently in. So the day when she's doing this whole big act crying and going on this frenzy about how upset she is that he's missing, detectives actually come the next day and Shera tells them that Lorenzen had been involved in quote unquote major criminal activity. And she previously had told them that they didn't have any problems, concerns, or enemies or anything like that, but she kind of changed her story up a little bit. And she stated that Lorenzen had actually left her house late on July 18th of 2010 with a box of drugs and cash. And she actually had stated weeks prior that there were men in a car with a Florida license plate that had come to the house looking for Lorenzen. So she's trying to paint this false illusion, paint this fake picture as to what's going on, that this man is involved in drug activity. May owe people money for the drugs, different things like that. And in separate conversations with the detectives, Lorenzen's mother, Miss Marion, is saying that Shera was acting really strange and she knew that something was up. So again, mothers always know pretty much and they have a gut feeling, and she kind of knew from the beginning that something wasn't quite right with Shera's story. On July 28th, when she's still with investigators, she's actually telling them that Lorenzen had made a phone call before leaving her house around 11:30 p.m., stating that he was going to go flip something for $110,000. And again, it's going to be pretty believable because they had $3 million in debt. He was no longer working as a professional basketball player anymore and they needed money. So it is plausible that maybe he could have gotten involved with this activity to try to flip some money and it was a really good distraction. But investigators are pretty smart and they've got some good evidence and witnesses that are going to be coming up in the story you'll see where they in fact did not believe that this was going on. So by this point, police had actually linked Lorenzen to a 911 call that was actually made on July 19th, 2010 at 12:05 a.m. This is the day, of course, that Lorenzen Wright is murdered. And the call had been lost for about 9 days just because there was some confusion and overlap in jurisdictions. So there was some crazy mix up. But the police, however, were able to track it down. The call basically came from an overgrown field in Memphis. It was in a Memphis wooded area where Lorenzen, Shera, and some of their friends would go over the years sometimes to drink, relax, and just kind of have a good time. So it was basically an area that was very familiar to them, which makes me wonder, of course, was it easy for her to make sure, Shera, to make sure that Lorenzen was lured out there? It's very, very, very sad. Authorities there discovered Lorenzen's body, along with his necklace, watch, and shell casings from two guns that were scattered on the ground. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead right now and I'm going to play the 911 call, which is very sad and disturbing. It is the same one that I played in the beginning of the video. I just want you to hear the angst, the terror, and the fear in this man's voice moments before he takes his last breath and knowing that this is how it all ends. He can't believe it. He came back here to Tennessee to make up with Shera, the love of his life, he thought, and he has his kids to live for. He cannot believe in these last moments that this is how he actually is going to go out. So I do want to go ahead and play the 911 call. Okay. And then I'm going to also play a video of where his body is discovered, and we'll be right back.
Hi, come through. Georgetown 911, where's your emergency? Hello? 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 Son, I have nothing but gunshots. Hello? Hello?
So that was a pretty disturbing and chilling video. In the photo that you see here, this is where Lorenzen Wright's body was found. And it took them about 10 days to find it. So it stayed out there for about 10 days. It was exposed to 90-degree temperatures. So you guys have to understand, this is in the South in the summertime, right? July. And there had been half inch of rain that had fallen, and the remains were essentially a skeleton by the time they found him. I saw in my research that the body weighed about 57 pounds when they found him. So it had basically decomposed that much by that time just because of the weather and everything. So, investigators state that it was kind of a cold case by the time that they got to it. And about 4 days after they had discovered his body at this location, they went ahead and searched his ex wife Shera's home. And the neighbors told them about an unusual bonfire that she had in her backyard a night or two after Lorenzen had disappeared. And at this point, of course, she had retained a criminal defense attorney because things were starting to stack against her and it wasn't looking too good for evidence regarding Shera's involvement. Now, this case remained open for quite a while before they were able to actually formally charge anyone, and the actual murder weapon was not actually located until about 2017. So it's definitely a case that took years for them to solve. Not as much as some of these cold cases that have not been solved since, say, the 50s or the 60s, not that long, but it did take a good bit of time for them to actually formally charge. For example, Billy Turner, which we're going to talk about him in a little bit, he just got charged this year in 2022. Mind you, this case actually has been going on since 2010, so for about 12 years. And they did not locate the murder weapon until about 2017. So, just to kind of give you some context of timelines, it did take a good bit of time for them to solve this, but thankfully, for Lorenzen's sake, they were able to do that. After Lorenzen's death, he is mourned by his family members, his mother, his father, his children. And of course, Shera was seen at the funeral acting as if she was devastated and crying as well. But he definitely was loved by a lot of people in the community. Thousands of people attended his memorial service in downtown Memphis, and he had a silver casket that rested on the front of the stage among tons of photos, lots of flowers. There were coaches, pastors, relatives, politicians, former NBA players testified their special bond between Lorenzen and the various basketball teams and friends and loved ones that he had. So he definitely had an outpouring of love and support until this day. People remember the story, people are still talking about it just because of the impact that he had, not only in the NBA world, but just basically as a person. Like I said, he had a very pure and loving heart. He had the foundation in the death and memory of his infant baby. So he was just a really good person and he had a very large amount of support from the community after his passing. Now, about 14 months after his death, there was a $1 million life insurance policy check that arrived, and guess who checked in on it? Of course, Shera did. Now, Shera went on a spending spree. She made sure that she took care of herself with this money. The court records show that the gravestone that was purchased was about $1,400 that she got for that. That was the first expense that she used with the money was a $1,400 headstone. And then after that, she went out to buy $70,000 of furniture and a Cadillac, a Mercedes, and a Lexus. What a way to grieve the death of your children's father, just go on a binging shopping spree, purchasing all of these different things. She also acquired a 5,300 square foot house in foreclosure, and then she put $7,100 down on a swimming pool. Now, she liked to go on different vacations as well, so she spent roughly $12,000 going on a family trip to New York. And she also made several cash withdrawals, wrote checks to herself as well, in more than the amount of $344,000. It stated that she spent most of the life insurance money, wait for it, this is $1 million, in the first 10 months, court records show. Okay. So she spent that money and just went through it quick, quick. She didn't waste any time. And she's not putting money aside for things that are super practical, it looks like with these court records. She's buying luxury vehicles, she's going on trips, she's getting another home with a lavish luxury swimming pool. She misses the life that Lorenzen was able to provide for her, and ultimately, she wants it. She feels like she deserves it. She feels like she's entitled to it. And if that means murdering him to get the $1 million to get it and spend it in less than a year, she's going to do it. So, this is the kind of stuff that she was doing after the death of Lorenzen. So, this is no secret what she's doing, and a lot of people are talking about what's going on. However, her kids stated, especially Lorenzen Jr., that she basically cared about nothing but her kids, right? He states she don't care about anything else but her kids. So he's stating that she was using the money on them. It was all for the family. So her children were very supportive that she wasn't just misusing the funds, which should have been for her kids. But despite her children's support that their mother was not mishandling the funds, there was a court filing in 2014 that showed that Shera had a lack of prudent financial judgment, and she had, I hope you're sitting down for this, only $5.05 remained in the trust's bank account. So she blew through all of that money, and there was only $5 left in there, I guess just to keep the account quote unquote active. Despicable. So there is evidence that she was in fact mishandling the money. However, I do understand that her children love her and they want to think the best of their mother. So I could see why they would support her, but the evidence is there that she clearly mishandled the funds. This is a case that took several years to solve. It is stated that Memphis police between 2011 and 2016 received several phone calls with tips stating that they needed to look at Shera, and a grand jury did actually question her. However, during those particular years, no official charges were actually filed against her. Now, major tips and evidence for the case wouldn't really appear until about 2017. However, Billy Turner, as pictured here on the screen, was actually given by two tipsters from the Memphis Crime Stoppers as a potential suspect in Lorenzen's death in 2010. So it's not clear as to why those tips did not advance the case, because it turns out that these two on my screen, Billy Turner and Shera, were in fact behind the death of Lorenzen. Now, there was some speculation going on that Shera and Turner were in a romantic relationship at the time of Lorenzen's murder. However, the daughter, Lauren, states that she does not agree. She states that that was not her mom's secret lover. So a lot of that is just hearsay. But the two of them did know each other. It turns out that Mr. Turner was actually a convicted felon, and he was actually a deacon at a church that Shera had attended at one point. So it was actually the Collierville Church is where this convicted felon, Billy Ray Turner, was actually a deacon, and Shera actually went to the church at that one point, and the two of them met, and Shera basically did a plot murder against her husband, murder scheme, and basically having Billy Turner be the one that's going to go ahead and ultimately pull the trigger and kill her husband. So the actual murder weapon was actually not even found until about 2017. There was an FBI dive team that actually went into a lake in Tennessee, and the testing matched that the shell casings near Lorenzen's body was actually the same as the actual Smith and Wesson pistol that they used. So that was how they were able to ultimately get the murder weapon for the evidence there. And they also had testimony and witnesses as to these two conspiring to do a plot murder against Lorenzen Wright. Shera was officially arrested on December 15th of 2017. One of their friends, Martin, had alleged that Shera had paid him and Turner in a failed attempt to kill Lorenzen to collect the life insurance money in early 2010. So they had actually entered a window, both Martin and Turner, that Shera left unlocked. However, Lorenzen was not there. So I guess what happened was Shera then worked with Turner in July, And that was the time when they actually went through with murdering him in that wooded area of Memphis, where they shot him in that wooded area. Again, Shera was the one that conspired and got Turner to actually do the deed. So initially, Shera and Turner had both pleaded not guilty. However, some time had passed in between the tip from Martin about the guns in their arrest, and they have now been formally charged. So, based on the evidence of them finding the murder weapon in the lake, testimony from Martin, also phone calls that they were able to intercept, and also at the home of Shera back in 2010, they found burnt pieces of metal. They also found a burnt letter that was addressed to Shera. So there were a lot of circumstantial but good grounded evidence in the case, with testimonials of witnesses that were able to ultimately get Billy Ray Turner and Shera Robinson convicted. So they both were tried and convicted in 2017. However, the sentencing for Turner did not finish until this year in 2022. Actually, just in March, he was actually convicted and charged with the murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. So that was excellent news. This was a supposed deacon that was in a church. Again, another fake, someone that was possibly involved with Shera and ultimately claimed the life of this rising NBA star. He is behind bars where he deserves to be today, and he deserves to rot there until his time on this earth is done. As for Shera, she was convicted back in 2019. She was given 30 years, and she's recently appealed it about a year or so ago, and she's going to keep trying to appeal it. But his mother, Miss Marion, has basically stated that she's going to do all that she can to make sure that this woman stays behind bars because of what she did, to make sure that she doesn't get any of these appeals. So her children, of course, love her. A lot of them are still maintaining her evidence, and I'm sure it's very difficult for them to have a mother that's behind bars, barring the fact what happened to their father as well. But it's just an unfortunate reality of what's happened in the case, and now the children basically don't have both of their parents. They're pretty much adults at this point for the most part, and they've got family members and relatives that help out, but it's pretty difficult to have your one parent be murdered and then your other one behind bars. It's tough. So Shera has basically pretty much this whole time maintained her innocence. She stated that people basically are not going to want to believe her. People are going to think the worst of her, but that she's grown as a woman. She's grown as a woman of God, and she's just basically maintaining her innocence in all of this. She states that she loves her children and that the father of her children is someone that was special to her in her life, but she's just basically still maintaining her innocence and basically appealing every chance that she gets. At the end of the day, if she was doing this to get the money, she basically got the money but blew through it, but at this point is not even able to spend time with her children either. So for her, it was also a lose lose. So Deborah Marion, the mother of Lorenzen, has thought since the beginning that something was fishy with Shera, and she's just finally happy that justice has been served and that the case has finally been found out, the truth. She states that it'll never be closure because she'll never see her son again. However, she said it's some satisfaction for she and her family, and she planned on visiting the grave the following Monday of her son after they had done the verdict. And she was very, very happy with the guilty verdict for both Billy Turner and Shera as well. So he is survived by his mom, his dad, and his children. And although he'll never be brought back, they do have some justice in knowing that the people that were behind this have in fact been punished and charged. And so that is the story on the murder of Lorenzen Wright. Again, a very tragic and sad story that this nice NBA player who had his whole life ahead of him, who was super successful, who had kids that loved and adored him, a family, mom and dad that loved and adored him, life was cut short all because of rage and a greed of wanting money. Very, very sad. But I hope you guys learned a little bit more about his legacy and his life. If you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to see you guys back, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Bye now.